Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Greetings and welcome to the show. And this week and next week are going to be the last two parts of UFO History with Aaron Gulyas and Mike Clelland. This is part 10. Next week will be part 11. We recorded them both in one sitting. I will probably have part 11 up for Patreons this week, rather than, if you're a patron, you don't have to wait for the second part till next week. So, we're actually up to date, and then we're going to do some other types of series with them. If anyone has ideas of what they'd like to hear us cover with Mike and Aaron, feel free to shoot them my way. We were thinking maybe focusing in on certain events or researchers and just kind of like looking at their careers, something along those lines. But if you have an idea, please, contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com or just go to the website and use that little pop-up to send me a message. Okay, and also, this coming Friday, February 10th, I am going to be back on the Den of Lore show. I participated, I believe, in his very first episode in a roundtable with a few other people, and he is doing a telethon, basically, for John Anthony West. Now, if you don't know who John Anthony West is the researcher who brought to the world's attention, the water damage on the Sphinx, placing it at a much older age than Egyptologists said. He brought in Robert Schoch, who was an actual geologist, who confirmed his findings, and things just kind of went from there in the early 90s. We've talked about it many times on the show. John has been on the show in a video interview with Laird Scranton. He had invited us out to his home in Albany, and we got to sit down with him and just kind of pick his brain on various subjects along with Laird. And if you haven't seen that, it's on our YouTube, and I believe I have the audio version up as well on the page, and that's all at www.thelastexit.org. Now, if you want to check out the Den of Lore show, it's going to be live on YouTube, I believe. So just look for Den of Lore, as in D-E-N of L-O-R-E, and I will be posting about it as well before it happens on our Facebook and Twitter and stuff. And what it's going to be is myself, the host, and Robert Schoch, I think, is also going to be co-hosting with us, and we're going to interview Graham Hancock, Robert himself, Laird Scranton, Scotty Roberts, and Randall Carlson about their thoughts and memories of John Anthony West. John Anthony West, as I said, is fighting cancer, and I think I said that anyway. And so we're going to, it's kind of a fundraiser. There's a Fundly for him, and you can find that at fundly.com/John-Anthony-West-Project. I'm sure if you just search for John Anthony West Project and Fundly, you should be able to find it. So if you can help out at all in John's medical expenses, that would be fantastic. So again, that's the 10th, and it'll be live on YouTube. And if you're hearing this later, it should be available. I'll probably make it available on the Where Did the Road Go page. So, check it out. It's for a very good cause and a very awesome man. All right. With no further ado, here's UFO History, Part 10. So welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? This is Part 10 of UFO History with Aaron Gulyas and Mike Clelland. And we started this just about 2 years ago. How you doing, guys?
Good.
Very good.
And as we were talking before we started, if we had actually planned on this to be a long series, we'd probably be up to the 80s by now. Because we spun through a lot of the early stuff thinking we could all somehow manage to get it all into one episode. I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't know how we thought we would do that.
If we just said everyone's name once and then continued on.
Yeah.
There were cattle mutilations and Bud Hopkins and Whitley Strieber and... All right, so we're up to the last within the last 10 years, probably a little less than that actually at this point. I don't know if it's all going to fit in this part. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't. But we're going to see what we can get done here in part 10. And the first thing I think we'll tackle, let's talk about Sirius, and I know we've talked about what's his name, the
Stephen Greer,
Stephen
the
Greer
doctor,
before.
the good doctor.
And we may have touched on the Sirius documentary, but I don't know if we took it on directly. It came out in 2013. And myself, I thought it was a well-done documentary.
It sure was. Slick as can be, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't look like I was afraid or expected it to look. It was pretty slick. It was good. The biggest thing that sort of popped out at me as being an issue is sort of the same thing we're going to see when we look at, say, the citizens' hearing on disclosure or other things like that, is you've got this blend of witnesses that are very, very credible and witnesses that are less credible. And something I can't really remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. When did it come out? And yeah, about almost 4 years ago. But I just remember
2013.
Yeah, I remember watching it, and there were people like, wow, that's really sort of interesting stuff, and that's that sounded real, right? And then there'd be somebody, or they'd bring out the Atacama, I think that was it, the little skeleton, and start talking about that. Yeah, Ata, yeah, and I'm just like, no. Get back to more credible stuff. But it was overall, it was good. It was much better than anything than I thought anything would be that Stephen Greer was involved with.
It had like it was an A, it was like an A production. It was grade A production.
What threw me is that they get to the end where they're going to give you the DNA, and the DNA turns out to be mostly human, and it's kind of like, and they just kind of gloss over it and keep going, and it's like, no, wait, hang on.
Yeah, it was this sort of, they didn't even, they just sort of, it's almost like when they were producing, they're like, okay, we really don't know what to do with this, so just ignore it and we'll move on with everything. But yeah, it was odd
to me.
And that was the linchpin of it. It was just kind of like, and there's every reason to make a documentary in real time if you're exploring something. I mean, if you're a documentary filmmaker, you don't necessarily need to know when you start out what the thrust of the documentary will be. But there was never like the like, oh damn, kind of thing where they all like, say, well, this was an odyssey and it didn't lead where we thought it would.
Yeah.
And because in a more, I guess, thoughtful production, that's how it would, you'd have the people sort of saying, for a while there, I really thought we were onto something. I really thought I was handling something alien. Now, it is still a genuine mystery what that little thing is my understanding. And there's all kinds of issues where a fetus or something, it may be, and then there's people that argue about the teeth and such, and I have not followed it that closely though. Now 4 years later, there has been, and this is through Facebook, so this is not like a reputable source, but they once again said that it was pretty much 100% human DNA.
I saw a story. One of those stories about that too, and yeah, I agree. I think that I like how you said that a more thoughtful production would have looked at the fact that this most likely wasn't an alien being or an alien artifact, and then gone back and talked to different people about that sense of disappointment. There's a way to tie it into the whole sort of scientific process as well. It's like you have a hypothesis and you test it, and hey, sometimes your hypothesis is wrong, and that's part of the whole process. But that isn't the direction they went in.
And whatever it is definitely an anomaly. It's not so much that. I believe
it's very interesting. I agree.
I believe they had determined it was like 9 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's still weird. And who knows why it's that small at 9 years old? I mean, even for a fetus, it's weird,
Yes.
And it wasn't fake. At least there was that. It wasn't a hoax. It was a real creature.
Yeah. How sad is it that we find that refreshing? It's like, well,
yeah. And there was a scene in that film that really struck me where there's like this, it was purposely with the swelling music and the way it was edited and stuff, where Stephen Greer goes to the Jefferson Memorial, and it was just kind of this moment of, like we're supposed to get confused, like which one is which, like, wait a minute, which is Thomas Jefferson and which one is Stephen Greer? So I just thought that was like, how did that get sort of slipped into the documentary? But and then I think I may have said this before, I feel like I'm very cautious, like in this field, to play the sort of pointing fingers and making fun of other researchers. I think it's just it's just a bad way to go about, it's just not in me to do it. Let me put it that way, except if it's Stephen Greer, where I feel like I have complete permission. I'm not going to hurt his feelings. So yeah, he's the one person who I'm allowed to, I've given myself permission to sort of, needle him, which I feel is completely justified.
And
yes.
And this thing, I mean, I don't remember if we talked about the Star Child skull or not, but the Star Child skull I kind of put in the same category, where it's not necessarily extraterrestrial, but it's definitely an interesting anomaly.
Oh yeah. It's not. I'm not saying it's more interesting than if these things were actually alien, but I think sometimes people let their desire for anything to be proven to be alien sort of override their sense of wonder at how strange the actual Earth can be, which is unfortunate.
And how little we may know about our own species.
Yes.
And that was Lloyd Pye, who died of cancer, I think, probably now a few years ago.
Yeah.
Probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I saw him speak at a conference, and he was a great presenter, very thoughtful, very clear, and very, very scientific about the DNA. And I should be careful what I say, because I can't. There was some sort of DNA, and I don't know if it was actually from that Star Child skull, because that was like a crystal skull. It was not. No,
it wasn't
made
crystal.
Of fossilized bone. What was it?
Yeah, it was bone.
Yeah, okay. So now I'm blending this with there's these crystal skulls that are sort of making the rounds too. Okay, yes. I'm getting my esoteric skulls mixed up here. So
he died in 2013. Actually, he died a few months after I had him on the show.
I thought he was a really nice guy.
He was an extremely nice guy.
Yeah.
He's a good guest too. I remember hearing him on Coast to Coast back in the day. And it was one of those topics where I didn't think I'd find it interesting, but he made it way more interesting than I expected it to be.
Well, he did a good job of throwing off the debunkers. I mean, they would say, well, it's just this, and he'd show with scientific evidence, no, that doesn't explain this. They say it's a deformity. He's like, deformities aren't symmetrical. Look in the scientific literature, you'll find deformities are not generally symmetrical. Everything on the skull is symmetrical. Mm-hmm. So it was meant to be that way, whatever it is. My only issue, and I've said this before, is that he jumped to the conclusion that it was a gray alien rather than just saying, we don't know what this is.
Right.
Yeah.
And one day we might find another one just like it. Who knows? I mean, when you think about how little of the fossil record and how little of bones we actually have of ancient times.
Yeah, there's a vast amount of the record that is out there waiting to be uncovered, and now with all the tools we have compared to 50 or especially 100 years ago, any little thing we find, we can get infinitely more information out of it than we ever could before.
Yeah,
aren't they trying to like do the Jurassic Park thing, and they're trying to like. Use the DNA from a mastodon or something like that, and trying to like.
Yep.
That sounds like a bad idea. So.
I don't know. I'm curious.
I'm genuinely curious, but I mean, I've seen enough, science fiction to know.
Yeah, it's like, haven't you people watched movies?
Haven't you seen a Vincent Price movie ever?
This doesn't end well.
Yeah, it's like The Tingler. Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on to the disclosure hearings, since we just mentioned them. And these were in April 2013. And they actually got quite a bit of press, considering it's, UFO stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, so I actually have met Stephen Bassett and hung out with him a bit and talked to him on a handful of occasions at conferences. Have you ever interviewed him on the show?
No, I haven't.
He is a really likable guy. He's really dedicated, and just he exudes this kind of. He's got a ton of energy, and this is what he's doing with this crazy spinning, obsessive energy, is like, trying to push this disclosure thing. I'm not exactly sure who put up the money for that, but it certainly wasn't Stephen Greer. So someone put up the money for this publicity stunt. And as far as publicity stunts go, I gotta say it was pretty good. If you're gonna, it didn't interest me in the slightest because there was absolutely no new information that was presented. So, I felt like I had heard all the speakers give their spiel, and I watched a handful of the things on YouTube, and it was kind of UFO disclosure for dummies, kind of presented in this formal way. Yeah,
it was my favorite thing in a sort of mocking Mystery Science Theater 3000 sort of way about it was the fact that each of they have these basically washed up politicians paid $20,000 a piece to show up and look really concerned and sort of nod thoughtfully while people talk at them about flying saucers for a day, and then they sell the testimony. I was looking on earlier. If you pay $100, you can get the entire 1 day, 7 hours of testimony.
No, it was more than a day. I think it was multiple days. It went on for multiple days. It was multiple days.
Yeah, but when they sell the video, it's like 1 day and 7 hours worth of video.
Oh, okay.
It looks like so all of the multiple days of hearings sort of collapsed into one, and I think she was the chair was Carolyn Kilpatrick, who was sort of the former member of Congress from down in Detroit, and her son was Kwame Kilpatrick, who I think is still doing time in a federal prison for various corruption things, the dead stripper in the mayor's mansion and all that. And I was just like, it must be nice to be part of what was basically a political crime family, and then get $20,000 to do this nonsense. So it was just, and here's the thing. I mean, I'm not sure that actual members of Congress and senators have any power to do anything about disclosure. So I'm absolutely certain that former senators and representatives have no authority or power to do anything about anything with this. And I mean, it's the sort of thing that, I don't mean to sound rude or anything. It's the sort of people dumb, uninformed people think government does. Well, they're going to have a hearing, and then they're going to do something about it. It's like, no, they're not. The hearings are to get people off your back about hearings. And unofficial hearings are to, I guess, I'm not even sure what the purpose was, other than at some point making somebody some money. Although,
I don't think it made any money. I think people lost their shirt. Yeah, I
can't imagine how it could have.
Yeah, but publicity stunt. I mean, that's a correct.
Yes.
I think if publicity, and as far as publicity stunt, I'm going to stand firm. Not bad. So
as a stunt, yes. I'm concerned that there is a non-zero number of people who thought it was something more significant.
True.
And that's all the better, I mean, if you're going to do a stunt and you want it to be, authentic, you might as well, that's like sure. That's like the owls what's the fourth kind, where they had the publicity stunt for that, where they claimed it was based on real events.
Oh, yeah.
And they found, here's the actual footage. And I mean, come on, we had, that's like
bad.
There's a rich history of I mean, I kind of knew right before the thing started. I figured it out, but there's no rule book as far as like doing horror films. I mean, William Castle would love that. So,
hey, George Norrie believed it. May still believe it's real.
Well, yeah, I'm sure he does.
It always amuses me when I watch something that says based on a true story, and I think, okay, is it really? And then I'll look it up and find that, yeah, something similar to this happened, but none of the events in the movie have anything to do with reality. It's like, okay, that's what I expected.
Right. Isn't all fiction based on some true story at some point?
I would think so, yeah.
Every murder is based on the concept of murder, which is a real thing. So, hey, it's based on a true story.
Yeah, there's real detectives out there. So.
Yes, there are police.
Exactly.
I was actually surprised when I looked up, was it War Dogs? And where they were selling the weapons to the U.S. military there.
Oh, yeah.
And that's based on a true story. And when I looked it up, they said, yeah, most of this stuff actually happened like this. They exaggerated some of the action scenes in Iraq and stuff like that. I don't think they ever went over there. But like 80% of the movie was pretty faithful to how things actually played out.
Wow.
As well as The Men Who Stare at Goats too. I mean, that was, and that had a and I'm trying to think of like the little title card that was presented at the beginning of Men Who Stare at Goats. It said something to the effect of, what you were about to see in this film, more than you would dare believe is true. Something to that effect.
Yeah, it's something really clever because it's the way the film was. I mean, because I love the book and the film is pretty good, but it's not quite, but it's I think that little their disclaimer card or whatever was I really liked how it was worded. It's more than you dared believe. Yeah. It's true. I think I thought that was clever.
And you get to see Ewan McGregor do, of all things, a Michigan accent.
That was awesome.
Which I appreciated, having come from the state that's shaped like a mitten.
Yeah, it's just an aside here. Every TV show or movie that has people from Michigan, none of them actually sound like they're from Michigan. They all sound like they're from Iowa or something, and it's frustrating. Or from Indiana, which has no real accent at all.
And there was a made for this is total aside, doesn't have anything to do with UFOs, but a made for TV movie called The Betsy in the 70s with Rock Hudson and Laurence Olivier. And Laurence Olivier played the aging Henry Ford.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and it was, it was kind of a, based on a soap opera type book. But yes, and so one more British actor doing a Michigan accent. So.
Huh.
Okay, back to UFOs. Back to
right.
it was Stephen Bassett and the Disclosure Project. There was a incredibly mean-spirited article in the Washington Post about that, where the guy basically, talked all about the cookies. He went there and just stayed at the catering table and didn't talk to any of the people or anything like that, and just ate all the cookies. And that was his editorial for the Washington Post. And that was at the Washington Press Club, so it did have like a where, other type of press events are held. Certainly, that with a of national importance over the decades that's been in place. So
isn't that where Hoagland always had his things? I remember he was always all head up about being at the National Press Club. And
then on Stephen Greer, the original Disclosure Project was at the Press Club too, I believe. And then there was a follow-up to that James Fox did at the National Press Club. I think I'm getting all this right.
Yeah, it has a real cachet to have an event there. Yeah.
And good cookies, according to the Washington Post. Yeah,
that's all you need.
I mean, to me, it feels like you're never going to get anything out of the government akin to disclosure. It's just either the people who want it in government probably don't have access to it. If there's really anything that they know that we don't already know, I mean, I'm sure there's little bits and pieces here and there, but as far as the big picture, I'm not sure the government really knows anything. So you can do all the disclosure hearings you want without ever really bringing anything out. I mean, they didn't ask the government for anything. They just made, ex-members of government listen to them.
Oh, I was just curious about the National Press Club. On their website, you can rent almost any of the rooms there for any event you like: dinners, weddings, bar and bat mitzvahs. So, I mean, we three could have an event at the National Press Club if we really wanted to pony up the money for it. So,
or get some really rich person to.
Yes, which would be preferable.
I do think part of the point was to bring the subject into a more into the public eye without making fun of it as much.
Yeah.
It had the veneer of something important, and once again, because right on publicity stunt. More power to you.
and I think it looked way more impressive, maybe not way more impressive. I think it looked more impressive to people who weren't familiar with the people involved. Because if you tell me that Steve Bassett is putting on a big UFO thing and Linda Moulton Howe is going to be there giving testimony, I just start giggling. But for somebody who's just like, I read about this in the paper, and actually I did have people, ask me, have you heard about this? They're doing a big, congressional investigation about UFOs. I'm like, okay, let me dissect everything that's wrong with what you just said. It says these people have less authority than my local city council, but it does. But it like Mike said, publicity stunt. It did what it was supposed to do.
So in that sense, it was kind of a success. I mean, it made some people think maybe there's something to this UFO thing I've been ignoring all this time.
Yeah.
Unless they read the editorial in the Washington Post. Yeah.
Right.
So, and I mean, they had, the lineup was kind of, I would say top shelf in some ways as far as the type of speakers you would get at a UFO conference. So, they, and then the testimony, I think, there's some valid, interesting testimony there. I mean, Jesse Marcel Jr., spoke there, and he, in my opinion, is a very, very credible witness. He never strays beyond his own story, and has nothing to. He's not pushing anything, or he's got no agenda or no chip on his shoulder or anything like that. So,
yeah, it was the usual mix of really good witnesses and witnesses. You're like, him, that's not helping you. Get him out of there. Put another guy like the last guy on there, which is, was it, whichever the earlier, was it in 99, that disclosure event at the
2001, and that was just shortly before 9/11. So all you conspiracy people, that's the reason they were allowed to have it, because they knew the whole thing would be shut down. So.
Or they engineered 9/11 because everybody's going to start talking about what they just saw at the disclosure event. But that one had the same problem. You'd have really credible sort of aeronautics and NASA people, and then you'd have somebody with much less credibility right after them, and so there were plenty of things for people who were predisposed to mock. It made it. Sometimes these things make it too easy, but I mean, that's what happens, because you want to get the whole spectrum of what you think the phenomenon is, and that sometimes includes the stuff that's a little less, sort of tangible. So it's the risk you take, but even that stuff has its devotees, right? So
sure,
you gotta speak to everybody.
All right, let's move on to the return of Art Bell. Now, of course, Art Bell wasn't directly associated with the UFO phenomena, but he did a lot of shows on UFOs, and obviously we talked about some of the who was it with the screaming alien we talked about?
Victor. Was that Victor?
No, that's
the one in
Kentucky. Reed, Jonathan Reed.
Yes, Jonathan Reed. Yeah. So he's definitely, had his fingers in the UFO subject for a lot of the time he was on the air. He went off the air from coast to coast early 2000s, and when he came back, he started back on Sirius FM July 29th, 2013. And I think it was on the first or second show he did a scathing thing on Premiere. Is it Premiere that runs Coast to Coast?
I think it's Clear Channel now.
Okay.
But it was Premiere, and I think Clear Channel bought him.
Okay. And he just tore into them. And it was interesting to listen to, because, I mean, no one really knew what happened. There was a lot of speculation. He just went out there and took them apart for the way they treated him and just abandoned him. And apparently he had also asked them to stop running his old shows on Saturday nights, and they basically said no. And he said, "Well, that's your right. You own them. I was just asking."
Yeah. I was going to say that yes, it was a scathing takedown, and yes, the corporate meddling in the show, I think, changed it for the worst. In all those things, he was correct. Of course, when you sell it to a corporation, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that struck me about, I signed back up for Sirius as soon as I heard that Art Bell was coming back, and then 6 weeks later I was like, hey, what? Come on. But one thing that struck me about the show when he came back is I think one of the guests he had on was Jonathan Reed.
Yes, it was, and I was shocked.
Yes, I was just like, I thought, and maybe this was unfair of me, but I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be kind of like, okay, we're going back to if Art could do, his show like it always was, and it was like a 6-week greatest hits collection, and that he always had his repeat customers and everything, but now he's bringing back the repeat guests after a gap of half dozen years or so, and it just didn't feel the same. And
yeah.
it's that whole like frustrated nostalgia thing, but and then him leaving after 6 weeks, and I think the reason he gave was he wanted Sirius XM to set up a free stream so people wouldn't have to subscribe to Sirius XM to hear the show.
Yes,
which struck me as if that's the real reason, how dumb is he? And two, that is probably not the real reason. I mean, it's like, I guess people are saying, well, Opie and Anthony did it at some point, and I'm like, Art Bell is not Opie and Anthony. Art Bell's barely Art Bell anymore. He's not even the host of Coast to Coast AM. So it was, it was frustrating that he left. But I kind of think, and like his well, we'll get to it, but I think he underestimated how much work it was going to be to have this 3 hour show, 4 hour show, whatever it was, every night live, and he's not a young guy, and it gets exhausting, and dealing with the technology, and although I think I remember that Sirius came to his place, his compound out in Pahrump, and installed a really nice home studio setup, and then came and ripped it all out once he went back in the deal. But then as soon as he left, the fans on the Art Bell message board start the countdown to when that non-compete was up, so he could be back, because he just, all Art wants to do is be on the radio for us, because Art loves us, because some of these fans, man, they're like fans, it's
weird.
They got that fanaticism, but then he would come back again with his own network.
Yeah, we'll get to that. As far as
just I mean, it's to do a radio or any like podcast or something like that, that's people, it's well into the 21st century. You can get a headset at Radio Shack and download Audible. I mean, you can do it all at home, on your laptop. So
yeah, that's one of the things, especially what year was it that he started the XM show? Is that 2012?
The XM was July 29th, 2013 was the first show.
Okay, and 2013. And people online, even on the forums, were saying this is like, well, why don't you just do a podcast? And he was like, no, I want to be on radio. And people were like, but radio's hard, and radio has radio has all of these things that you need to deal with, and he's hassling with the XM corporate people, and he's messing with this and he's messing with that, and people have to buy these subscriptions, and what it comes down to is Art Bell wanted to do a show where he would get the best deal for him, and when you're Art Bell, the best deal is going to be something like Sirius XM, and if people are like, well, we'd pay for it, and so it was interesting, because he was coming back and doing not terrestrial radio but satellite radio, but still, I think what I did and what a lot of people did was, when they subscribed to Sirius, what they did was they subscribed to the cheap web streaming only version, because I'm not going to go out and buy a satellite radio to listen to Art Bell.
Yeah.
I had one years ago because I liked the Trucker channel, but and other things, but I was commuting a lot, and it was really nice then. But it just seemed like an odd move, and it was disappointing when it ended so soon.
Yeah.
Because he was getting back into the groove a little bit, and then, yeah.
At the same time, even when he had guests on, like I had never heard Albert Taylor, and I got to talk to him on my show after hearing him on Art's show, because I thought, well, this guy's really interesting because he had a bunch of out of body experiences and was able to do them consciously, but he was also a robotics engineer and worked for NASA at one point. And I was like, okay, I want to talk to you. So he's making robots to hunt ghosts, and I thought, this is awesome.
That's cool.
And he says to, and Art says to him, so are ghosts spirits of dead people? And Albert's like, well, I don't know what they are. That's why we're doing this. We're trying to, I don't want to jump to any conclusion. And Art's just holding on. No, tell me, are they spirits of dead people? And I'm thinking, this is not good. This is not good journalism. You're just being closed-minded at this point.
Yes, there was, and he had a somewhat of a history of that. It got worse as he got older, but I remember one time, was it Glenn Campbell, the Groom Lake Desert Rat guy, the Area 51 guy from back in the 90s. He was on Art Bell's show. He was on Coast to Coast once, and Art was just like getting really frustrated at him because Campbell would not come out and say Area 51 is where they're messing with flying saucers, and because he was like, look, I've lived in the area for years and years and years, and I don't know what they're doing, but it's clear they're doing something, and that just wasn't good enough. Because it's not enough that you have a guest who's knowledgeable about a subject. It also has to be good radio, and apparently it can't be good radio if there's any ambiguity. So he just kept hammering this guy, and it was awkward to listen to.
Well, and that's it. A lot of people need that black and white thing. It either is this or it's not that. It can't be an open question, and I think that's where we don't make progress on this stuff.
Yeah. And sort of another thing that sort of, and this sort of gets into the broader paranormal and saucer media culture, is when Art Bell was doing Coast to Coast in its heyday back in 97, 98 or so, he was reaching millions of people a night, and he was reaching people who were just up in the middle of the night listening to the radio, truckers, people on third shift,
right,
all these people. And so it could be sort of paranormal entertainment. He could have the guests that were out there. He could have JC call in and, do his whole "you're going to hell" shtick. When he comes back in 2013, he's on satellite radio. It's more of a niche audience. It's a niche paranormal audience. It's an audience made up of two groups: Art Bell fans and general, I think, probably paranormal fans who are like, hey, I remember learning about this stuff on Art Bell, so I'm going to listen to it. And the Art Bell fans hear Art Bell doing what he always does, and the sort of paranormal media fans who have this sort of folk memory of what Art Bell was like 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not learning anything new. I remember 20 years ago I learned something new every time I listened to Art Bell, and now I'm not. It's just Richard Hoagland again. and again and again. So it's. I think the paranormal media culture sort of passed by a little bit, because by 2013, the big paranormal podcasts are all sort of going strong by that point.
Yeah.
A lot of them anyway. So I think it's interesting, and I don't know. I'm not sure how much weight the Art Bell brand carried in 2013. Enough for Sirius to sign him up, but
absolutely. But there were so many other alternatives too, and I think that hurt as well. There was still Coast to Coast out there, even though it wasn't what it was when Art Bell was doing it. And you had podcasts left and right that were covering the same stuff. So even though Art Bell had that legacy, I don't think it was enough for everybody to go, well, I'm gonna get it. I'm sure there were people going, I'll just grab it on YouTube when someone puts it up.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, it's the piracy stuff must be incredibly frustrating. I remember thinking that, and actually doing this, is I'd start listening to one of the new, Dark Matter shows, or was it Dark Matter? I think.
Yes, Dark Matter Radio Network. Dark
Matter, and then I'd realize, what? I'd rather listen to an Art Bell from 1996. And so I'd go into my hard drive full of Art Bell, much of which every time I look in that folder, there's something I'm like, I don't think I've listened to that one. So, there's this sort of, years and years and years of content, and it's times change, and that's Yeah, but he seems to have. I'm sure he left of his own accord because he left after 6 weeks. But
Yes. Oh, yeah. It seems like he definitely did.
yeah, it wasn't the same though. But nothing ever is.
True. Mike, any thoughts?
I never listened to Art Bell in the heyday or in the resurgence. So he's so that's that was I went straight from UFO books right into the podcast era. So
I had not listened to Art Bell in the heyday. I actually didn't think I liked talk radio, and it wasn't until Graham Hancock was going to be on Coast to Coast, and I went, well, I don't like talk radio, but I really want to hear Graham Hancock talk. And so I listened to the first ever episode of Coast to Coast that I had ever heard with George Norrie, and at some point, and I was like, wow, I actually enjoy listening to this because I like, Graham Hancock's work. And he had put up a post, a torrent of all his Coast to Coast appearances in the past, and a bunch of them were with Art Bell. So that was the first time I actually got to hear Art Bell is with those conversations with Graham Hancock.
Wow, cool.
And how were they?
Oh, they were excellent.
Yeah.
But it's hard for Graham Hancock to do a bad show. I mean,
Yeah.
Graham's one of those guys you could put a microphone in front of him and he could talk for 2 hours. And
Yeah, he's riveting. Yeah, I agree.
So he left Sirius, and of course you got to wait for his contract to run out. And then, meantime, they started Dark Matter Radio Network, and they actually picked up this show right from the beginning. Where'd the Road Go? We've been on there since the very beginning of Dark Matter.
That's right. Yeah.
And on July 20th, 2015, Art came back until December. That was a little bit longer than he was on Sirius. Did either of you get a chance to listen to him then?
Yeah, I did, and I thought it was better than the Sirius show. He sounded, I don't know, I think he had better guests. I think he had Graham Hancock on during that run.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to remember hearing a really good Graham Hancock interview during that stretch. It was good. And I thought this was a good way to do it. Sort of the internet streaming with the premium membership for those who wanted archives and direct contact to Art, the direct messaging system that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was nice and reminiscent of the old Fast Blast thing on the show. So he did a good job of sort of angling it towards kind of the retro thing. I thought it was good, and it was I liked the idea of the network. I thought that was really clever for Art to sort of build this hub, because for people who were associated with it, there's some cachet to being part of Art Bell's network there, and it gets you more exposure, and people who tune in for Art Bell will discover these other shows. So I thought it did more for the whole ecosystem than his Sirius show did.
Yeah, I would agree. Mike?
I never heard it, so
all right.
Can't say. Yeah, I wish I could. You know what I did? I read his book that he did with Whitley Strieber,
Superstorm,
which turned into the Superstorm book. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was an interesting book.
It was better than his other book, The Quickening. That was.
I don't think I've read that one.
You don't need to.
Okay.
It's
was that Art that wrote that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's basically all of Art's ideas about the future. Basically, we're all going to be living in a virtual reality world by the late 1990s.
Well, maybe we already are.
Maybe we always have been.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all of Art's making.
And this time Art retired again by his own choice, citing some fears for his family. And I don't know that any major details ever came out about that. There were apparently some gunshots around nearby his house and stuff.
Yeah, I was following this pretty closely on one of the somewhat critical Art Bell message board fan sites, and boy, I procrastinated a lot of work catching up on okay, what's happening with Art Bell fan websites today. But there was a lot of debate and discussion about whether or not there really was a threat, if he was overreacting, or if he was fabricating it because he wanted to basically retire again. And and foist this new host on the fans, and the horrible vociferous reaction against that poor woman was it is just, you sad people, just why are you so angry? Art Bell's been gone like most of the last 10 years. Why are you angry that he's gone again? But there's, people put up scans of the statement by the Nye County sheriff out in Pahrump that they couldn't find anything, and so the investigation was at a halt, and used that as proof that Art was lying about the whole thing. And other people point out that just because they don't find anything doesn't mean he was lying. So I don't think there was ever any sort of conclusive conclusion to that.
And I mean, without Art Bell, I'm not sure how the whole paranormal radio thing would have gone. I mean, he wasn't necessarily the first one doing stuff like this, but he had such a big impact on the way paranormal radio is done.
Yeah, he sort of created this template of that I don't think anybody has done as well since, of having the paranormal stuff, but then blending in some general sci-fi stuff, having some current event stuff, having the unscreened calls, which is, I don't know if we're ever going to see true Art Bell style unscreened calls ever again on that kind of radio show.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't do it if I was running a show. Suicide mission. Nobody's done it since, and nobody who's tried to do it. I don't know of anybody who's tried to do it exactly like that. Even the other shows that were sort of like Art Bell back in the day sort of faded away. The Paranet Continuum, which I loved, catching up on all those. When Michael Corbin passed away, that whole thing sort of left. Jeff Rentz.
Yeah.
Jeff Rentz, but which was actually the first paranormal radio show I started listening to back in the late 90s, because he had David Jacobs on, and Jacobs had just spoken at my college, and I was like, wow, I listened to this David Jacobs interview, and I thought, well, this host seems pretty sharp, and so I listened to Rentz, and yeah, so so his angle has changed a bit over the years, but it's nobody did it like Art, and I don't think anybody's actually tried, because he's Art Bell.
Yeah.
And
maybe he'll return from retirement one day.
Hey, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah.
I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe he does do co-hosting on Midnight in the Desert still.
Yeah, he pops in from time to time, I think.
So, all right, let's move on to, let's see, what would be next in the timeline? Probably the Roswell Slides, which we mentioned, I believe, at some point.
Yeah.
But obviously, this was easily one of the biggest stories last year. And
just last year. It's over a year ago. It's closer to 2 years ago, isn't it?
Well,
year and a half.
I think it'll be like a year or 2 years later in the summer.
Yeah, May 5th, 2015 was the big reveal.
Yeah.
So about a year and a half ago was the big reveal, and it was what, about 2 years that they were saying they had something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I just smelled trouble. Right from the very beginning, when it was like, we found these, these slides but we can't show anything. We found them in an attic, and they're obviously the Roswell wreckage slides, but we can't show them yet. And I'm like, it just had the smell of trouble right from the very, for the year, years out before the big mayhem in Mexico City.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was a tangential part of the Roswell Slides research group, sort of on the fringes, but privy to some of their conversations. And what was really interesting is that most of the work of sort of decoding the slides, which basically was visually focusing in on the slide, on the sign by the body that read that it was like this was the body of a small boy discovered in this cave, taken back in the 40s or something, or 30s, in some national park, and it was once the work was done to sort of decipher all of this stuff, it's just sort of really, really obvious. I mean, to some of us, it was kind of obvious that this was clearly a museum setting of some sort. This was not a lab. This was not a military facility. This is some sort of natural history, small natural history.
Yeah, and it had the feeling of just like, it's less so now, but I'm sort of a generation where I remember what it was like to have these kind of, corny, like tourist attractions peppered all throughout the country. Not quite Ripley's Believe It or Not, but that type of, these oddities and stuffed, iguanas and things like that, and a really big gift, store at the, as you exit the little tiny museum.
Oh yeah, I mean, for some of us who are a certain age, and I'm sort of at the tail end of this. I remember on vacation, seeing these places, dotted across the American landscape, near any real tourist area, there were always these things around, and my dad would never stop because he said they were a ripoff. But you always sort of saw them, and when you did go into them, they looked like the place in the Roswell Slides.
Yeah, exactly. That was my sense too. I just was like, wait a minute,
Yeah, it's and just the again, the kind of vociferous sort of backstabbing and denunciations within the Roswell Slides crew as they all hurried to distance themselves from anything to do with anything. And we were had, we didn't know it all. You don't know the real story, the whole story.
Yeah.
It was the damage control was almost as ridiculous as the slides.
And I believe a lot of them, like if I'm not remembering wrong, Richard Dolan stepped away pretty quickly once he got a good look at them and was like, oh boy, and people would attack him for it. And, obviously there are people who don't like Dolan, and I think that was more what they were attacking, is the fact that they didn't like him to begin with, and then they had something they could go after. But, he flat out said, yeah, I was wrong. He's like, when I got a good look at those slides, I realized that was not an extraterrestrial.
Yeah, I think Dolan, the only other thing Dolan could have done was sort of not get involved at all, but, once he was involved, I think he realized, like you said, he got out and was like, "Whoa, I've been had," basically.
Yeah, and I don't think he saw I don't think they let him see the slides before they were revealed. He was just down there to talk and
And it's my understanding, he gave a very, very straight talk about the historical context of Roswell. And, I don't really know how that would work. I mean, I haven't seen any footage from that. I mean, was there an interpreter on the stage, translating for him, or is just enough of the audience spoke English that he could?
That I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't either.
That's a good question. I don't think there was an interpreter. I think it was, honestly, I think they were mostly expecting, it was targeted for the event live, but I think a lot of the marketing was aimed at an English speaking US internet audience who would buy the $15 live stream of the event. So I don't think they had an interpreter. No.
Yeah, I don't know. So.
But obviously that blew up in their face. I mean, the very. And it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, did the people who started this really believe they had something? I mean, they must have. They must have fooled themselves enough to really believe they had something special here, because one look at them by most people and they went, well, like you guys said, it's a museum. I mean, that doesn't look like an alien body in a military laboratory, which is kind of what they were selling it as. And it's like... This is just as big of a disappointment as I expected it was going to be.
Yes.
And it just seems like if it wasn't, there's like this sort of military psyops kind of thing, like, let's lead them astray, let's do a little bait and switch, and let this build up the straw man and let it crumble. But this was. I don't think that's what happened. No. But it was so perfect in the way that it crumbled and fell apart. It was just so embarrassing.
Yeah, it was. It really was fun to watch. Because they were so. Some of them. What's his name? I think Don Schmidt. I think was
Yeah,
involved.
he was involved. Yeah.
Yeah, and just you'd read statements that are just so arrogant about how all the skeptics and debunkers are going to be proved wrong. When you see this, you are going to be amazed at blah blah blah. And it's just like, oh, come on! There's such an obnoxious, and Jaime Maussan is, he will. That was a big red flag for me. Roswell Slides was the biggest red flag, but Jaime Maussan's sort of, once he's involved, it's a promotional thing more than anything else. And it was just so fun to watch collapse. It was really really fun.
And it didn't. Who was involved in the whole Roswell Slides research group? I know Paul Kimball was a part of it.
Kimball was part of it. I think. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember because I don't think the names aren't on the website anymore. I think. Let me remember. Isaac Coy, I think, was part of it. Kurt Collins, I believe. Chris Ratowski from Canada. Lance Moody. And those are the ones off the top of my head. I don't have the secret group in front of me, the list of the secret group in front of me. But it was, and the secret group actually had more people than the core researchers. But they did a really good job of just saying, okay, so this is a blurry photo. We have computers now and can unblur things. But if you don't unblur it, you can sort of say, we have not touched this at all, and look how clear it is. It's like, well, you could make it a lot clearer, and then you'd know what the sign says. But you don't want to do that, do you? So it was, it was just so basically you just have to run this through a few filters, and you can read the sign. So
I do believe they said they turned it over to someone in the government to try to clear up, didn't they? And they said it couldn't be cleared any further or sharpened at all. Yeah,
I think they did say that. Yeah,
I remember there was some issue where they said something to the effect of, we've used the technology and this is as clear as we can get it, and then we're no clearer. And then this is all just online stuff that I've seen, and then someone ran it through some other filter, and you could pretty plainly read the little plaque.
Yeah. Now at the same time, the plaque could be wrong. To play devil's advocate here, someone may have found something anomalous and just said, "Oh, this is the body of a kid," and stuck it on a shelf in a museum.
That said, like I'm immersed in UFO research. I talk to no one who has seen little, 20-inch aliens that did not look like, anything I've heard a witness describe. That looked exactly like what people find in caves, mummified children or, so.
Yeah. And there's also the sort of very distasteful thing of, they're profiting off the body of a dead child. It's that, the sort of long history of misappropriation of Native American relics and things like that. It's like, it was a carny sideshow masquerading as something. It
was a carny show.
Literally,
that's the perfect
this is what they did.
Yeah, it was a tourist attraction.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's just the, luckily they lacked all humility about the entire thing, so their eventual fall was satisfying. I did some real Schadenfreude here. I like to watch these people fail. It's just, and I don't pity if you lost your $15 watching the streaming reveal or whatever.
And the thing is, so when it came out, I said, well, it's just another one of these, another alien autopsy film, another one of these things that's just going to turn out to be not what they're claiming it is. The only grain of hope I actually did hold out is that they were like, well, we're not releasing this till we're sure. We're going to get this analyzed. We're going to do this, and I'm thinking, wait, what if they actually do have something and they're doing this the right way? And then it came out and it was like, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, it was Yeah, they did not really. I don't know why they thought that this would fly. I think, kind of like some of the other things. I think a couple of them, like you said, probably convinced themselves it's real, and that they, by squinting, you couldn't read mummified body of 2-year-old boy or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Well, let's conclude part 10 right there. And I have a few things we're going to hit in number 11, and 11 may be the last one. Of course, we said that for the last few. So
No, I think we can do it this time, guys.
Yeah, we got the X-Files reboot. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. You know what? You mentioned it. Let's bring it in right now real quick to finish things off. What did you guys think with them rebooting the X-Files?
I liked about every other episode. Oh, I liked all of it. I loved a couple of the episodes out of there. The one with the lizard guy.
Yes,
that was incredible.
That was my favorite too.
God, that drove me crazy.
So fun. It was so fun. It just reminded me of some of the other episodes like that in the original run, and not that it's always in keeping with the sort of dark, mysterious, quasi horror theme of the show, but it's like episodes like that are things that only the X-Files could do. And
Star Trek did it.
Star Trek did it, but Star Trek didn't. I don't think Star Trek did it as well. The sending itself up, the little in jokes, the tombstones, with the names of production crew, and little things like that. I just thought that was fun. What I didn't dislike, unlike a lot of people online, is I did not have a problem with them completely jacking around the continuity and the myth arc, but they said this back in season 6 and now they say this. It's like, that's how the X-Files has always been.
Yeah,
it's always sort of disinterred and mutilated the corpse of its own mythology, because they created a mythology that was honestly almost too complex for most viewers to even comprehend, and even I think the producers sometimes to comprehend. And so they slap it around and they make it into something else that's timely. The one thing I did not like, I thought Joel McHale was severely miscast. I did not buy him in that role as the talk show host at all. I don't know. I like Joel McHale a lot, but I just don't think that he was the best for that role.
And Mike,
overall, I
your
liked
thoughts?
it, though.
Yeah, there was Christopher Knowles from The Secret Sun did a series of he reviewed it and
I have
critiqued
not read
it.
his stuff on the new series yet. I need to do that.
Oh yeah, it's worth it. It's great. And it's better than the show, I thought. And so it was really great because he was like right on it. You could tell he was in kind of like, nerd heaven and so it's like seemingly within hours of the show, finishing that night, the post was up, and you could tell just his dedication to digging through that. There was some cool stuff in there, and there was a scene which I remember I was sitting in, and where they were in the hospital where the children were sort of like being genetically enhanced and locked away, and they were watching Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. The one with Ricardo Montalban in it. And I just was like, oh my God, what does this reference mean? And there was, right after that, I went online and there was so much speculation on what did that one scene mean? What was it implying? How do you tie it back in? And then, I'm not actually sure if it was like a jump cut into the future, but it was Fox Mulder with the child he had with Gillian Anderson, and they were watching 2001: A Space Odyssey on the couch together, a little father and son moment. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? So they were like aiming high with their metaphors,
Yeah, it was very very thick. It was very sort of semiotically thick. Lots of symbols, lots of things that signify things, and sometimes what it signified was a little unclear. I also just have to mention I really liked the episode where Mulder was tripping on the hallucinogen, and
yes.
that was fun. You got the little cameo of the lone gunman. I'm pretty sure one of only 4 fans of the Lone Gunman TV series.
I loved that show.
It was awesome. I was so
Yes.
happy when it came out on DVD. That was like the happiest day of that year. I loved that show. It was so good.
And as far as it continuing, the Fox TV CEO says, a lot of conversations are going on. As you can imagine, these conversations are complex. We hope to be able to announce something shortly. The exec later confirmed that the goal is to order more than season 10's 6 episodes, but less than 22.
Cool.
Fair enough. I think these little short episodic television things can be kind of interesting.
There's
Sometimes.
so much to watch now that I don't know if I could make it through a 22 episode season of anything. I mean, between Netflix and Amazon and and the WWE network, I just have too much to watch.
There's just too much on the WWE network, period.
I'm working my way through WCW in 2000 under Vince Russo.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know, right? I feel I've sinned somewhere and need to atone.
All right. So the only thing I think I didn't like about the new X-Files was the ending, that they left it off on a cliffhanger without knowing if they were going to continue. And it's kind of like what?
Well, Scully was abducted. Yeah, that was. I mean, that was a UFO abduction.
Yeah. I hate cliffhangers in general. I do not think they serve a purpose other than to irritate people, because most of the time you have a year before that comes back. Yes. A year later, you don't remember what happened.
Except now that it's all on Netflix and things like that, and you can just rewatch it, So that might have been the case in a cliffhanger in an earlier era before, all this streaming video.
But I don't think they need them. I mean, the idea of the cliffhanger is to make sure people come back next year. But if you're doing a quality show, people are going to watch next year. It doesn't matter if you leave them on a cliffhanger. I think cliffhangers just serve to irritate people more than anything.
Scully was abducted. How much, how much better can it get? Yeah.
See, what I like instead of cliffhangers is what some shows have started doing. I think *Halt and Catch Fire* does this pretty well. Is the season concludes and everything is wrapped up, but there's something that happens near the end that sort of gives you an idea of where they might be going and what might be coming next, but it's not an actual cliffhanger. Yeah. It builds anticipation without being frustrating.
The new Doctor Who does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that. Okay, you've settled the story's over. Oh, here's where the next story will go. And if it doesn't end up getting renewed, it's not like the end of the world, because you haven't invested your time watching this whole season only to be left hanging.
Right.
So, all right, real quick, tell people where they can find you guys online.
Aaron? I'll jump in. Here, Aaron was pausing, and Mike Clelland. You can Google my name and owls. My website will come right up, which is Hidden Experience, and it's a blog, so it's hiddenexperience.blogspot.com.
And you can find me at on Facebook at Aaron John Gulyas. It's spelled just like on whatever screen you're looking at that has my name on it. I realize people are looking at my name probably. And so my author page is up there with various updates and links to things. Yeah.
All right, and we'll be back with UFO History Part 11. Okay, and that is Part 10. As I said, Part 11 is already recorded. I'm going to be airing it next week, unless for some reason something changes, but I'm going to try and send it out to Patreons early. If you want to become a Patreon, go to wheretheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month. You get extra stuff, and I promise you, merchandise is coming, and I plan on giving Patreons a discount on any merchandise they want. So, just have to work out the details on that and solidify a little more artwork, and we're going to start setting things up.